Any fan of American pop culture and cinema will know the name Marilyn Monroe like a flashbulb going off in the dark. At one point in time, Marilyn Monroe was America's sweetheart, and it was nearly impossible to see a rom-com in the theaters without her being the lead actress. She was the very apex of beauty and the very pinnacle of sex appeal in America from the late 40s to early 60s. Men wanted her, and women wanted to be like her. It's a story as old as time itself that those that find themselves with vast amount of success, fame, fortune, and status have just as many people trying to pry themselves into their lives to dig up any dirty details they can find, and then wave it about the public as though it's some sort of sideshow or circus act for entertainment purposes. And Marilyn, she wasn't immune to this, nor was she immune to the calamity of controversies and scandals that would follow her career. And as she went on with her acting and modeling career, we would find that even past her death, she would be a controversial figure. Now you have to keep in mind that this was the late 50s to early 60s. The Cold War was just kicking off, and the fear of red communism taking over American democracy was an ever-looming fear, as well as all-out nuclear war between two of the biggest superpowers the world had ever seen. But in this, Marilyn would actually find herself in a lot of scandals and controversies that at the time were very problematic. In 1956, the FBI would actually open up a file on Marilyn stating that she had quote-unquote problematic ties to accused communists. During this time, if you were an accused communist, you basically lost everything you owned. Your friends, your family, your house, your job. You basically killed someone without actually killing them. And with this came the rise of a very popular slanderous term of McCarthyism. McCarthyism is just accusing someone without any sort of merit of evidence of being the most downright horrible person you could think of, and in this case, it was a communist. And with this, a lot of people started digging into Marilyn's life to see if she actually had any communistic ties, or even if she was a member of the Communist Party herself. Though there was no proof ever found on her, and she just had people who were friends of hers that had left-leaning views when it came to politics. Though this file is still open, it never led to anything of Marilyn being convicted of anything. Though a lot of people were skeptical that she did have ties to communistic parties, but this mainly came from people who didn't like her. Unfortunately for Marilyn, though, this is not where the road of scandals ends. It's a far road, and 6 years later she would find herself once again in the spotlight of controversy with another scandal that would come to the public's eye. The infamous scandal between Marilyn Monroe and the alleged affair she had with the at-the-time president, John F. Kennedy, as well as his brother, Robert F. Kennedy. Now, while researching this, it turns out this scandal goes a lot deeper into the rabbit holes of tinfoil conspiracy and just downright deception and lies. It has a lot to cover with it, so I'll try to do my best and keep it simple, but you have to realize, this gets wild really fast. I remember a time when this was supposed to be a very short video about a man who was obsessed with Marilyn Monroe, not an entire crash course on history in the 60s. But anyways, we're already this deep, let me try and lightning around a few facts for you. To understand the Kennedy administration, we need to understand the Kennedy lineage. Basically, they're a very prominent family throughout American history. They're America's version of the royal family, basically. Being born a Kennedy has a lot of prestige and honor to it. With it also comes a lot of accessibility to education, as well as career paths and trades that you could want to get into. The Kennedy families are known for basically being in everything, from business and entertainment to public service and philanthropy and charity to, you guessed it, American politics. But with this also comes a dark side of the Kennedy family called the Kennedy curse. The easiest way to put this is that any misfortune that seemed to fall upon the Kennedy name, people linked to this curse in some way, shape, or form. It's not like a long time ago the Kennedys ticked off some old hag by cheating her out of riches or anything, and because of this their family is cursed until they make amends, kind of like holes in a sense. It's just that these tragic things sadly just happen a lot to the Kennedy family. Their history of plane crashes linked to a curse. David Kennedy dying in 1984 due to drug overdose while he was only 28 years old, blame it on the curse. William Kennedy Smith being accused of rape in 1991 only to be acquitted, blame that stuff on a curse. The behavioral issues and disturbing lobotomy stories of Rosemary Kennedy, you bet it was a curse. And I say all these things in a sarcastic tone, but it truly is sad that you look at all these misfortunes that the Kennedy family has had, only for some people to blame it on some sort of superstitious thing like a curse. Through all the deaths that have been caused due to human error or the ones that they couldn't control, it just seems ill-spirited to blame it on something that makes it feel like they deserve all this. One of the saddest ones that I've read is the passing of Patrick Kennedy, the son of John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie Kennedy. Patrick would be born in 1963, 5 months premature of his actual birth date, and because of this, his lungs and heart weren't at full condition, and he wouldn't even survive 2 days on this earth before passing away. I could only feel the pain that John and Jackie would have having to go through all this process of having a child, only for that child to not even get to enjoy life. And it just seems ill-willed and cruel to blame that on a curse as well. It's like saying your sister deserves to have a miscarriage because Bigfoot takes his shits in the woods. Those two things aren't even related. Remember how I said the Kennedy curse was used to explain all the misfortunes that happened to the Kennedy name? And you bet your bippy this was one of them. Though even after hours of research, I don't even know what to believe anymore. I don't know what's real, what's fake, what's right, and what's wrong. There's so many smoke and mirrors to this conspiracy and scandal, it feels like a Las Vegas strip club, with contradictory information, people saying they lied and made things up, as well as a bunch of mysterious elements that happened throughout. In Marilyn's case, in 1962, she would actually meet the president at a birthday gala held in his honor, where we get the infamous meme of "Happy Birthday, Mr. President." She would have the means and opportunity to meet him, and she herself even said she did sleep with the president. On top of this, if you look at the women that are alleged to have affairs with JFK, there does seem to be some sort of pattern. They're either very big socialites like singers, actresses, musicians, or they were women who had high status powers, like an ex-CIA agent's wife, or even a woman who had ties to the mafia. But on top of this, though, there's also information coming out that White House officials made all of this up, and that this was even an inside job to take down the JFK administration, and that there's a behind-the-scenes player that didn't like the way Kennedy was running the country. Even some White House officials saying they were so down bad for money that they made up these accusations against the president that they served for this money. And to even make this a more conspicuous conspiracy, in the same year that Marilyn would have this weekend fling and meet the president, on August 4th, 1962, Marilyn would be found dead in her own home, OD'd on barbiturates. Barbiturates are a sedative drug that are meant to help insomniac and people with anxiety, and they're meant to be taken in small doses lest you get withdrawal or overdose, and in which case it seems very conspicuous that this woman in the prime of her life would just suddenly OD in her own home. But I kinda have an idea of why she did this. Now, my theory behind Marilyn's overdose is very simple. She was a very popular actress and socialite. Like I said, men wanted to be with her, and women wanted to be like her. But with this also came a dark side of her that we didn't really see. One about stage fright and anxiety and stress, where she was very hard to work with, constantly forgetting lines and being late to movie sets. Having this huge fear of stage fright really did a number on her, and you could see it through her works of constantly being on edge and forgetting her lines. And maybe when this whole scandal of her having an alleged affair with the president of all people came around, she felt it was simpler just to say yes to it all, not try to deny it or hide it. And because of this, it brought a lot more stress than she thought it would, that by clearing the air and saying she did, it'd be simpler. But at the end of all this, all it did was rack up a lot of boulders that she couldn't carry. And one night on August 4th, she would try and take barbiturates to unwind and help her sleep and cool her anxiety, only to find that the stress and anxiety was too great, and she started miscalculating, taking too much, all to a point of eventual overdose. I feel she was just a troubled woman that had too much going on, and in the end, made one fatal error that took it all away from her. Or JFK had her whacked. Either one's a good possibility. And to this day, Marilyn can be found preserved inside her crypt in the Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park, where there's a lot of controversy around people leaving lipstick imprints on her crypt to show some sort of sign of respect, or maybe as some sort of homage of a great actress, and maybe it'll bring luck to up-and-coming actresses if they do the same. though the park heavily ridicules people who do this and highly advise going against it, as well as people who just want to cherish Marilyn's memories. But there's also a funny story about the crypt right above her. It belonged to Joe DiMaggio before they actually got divorced after 9 months, and who lives in there now has a bit of an interesting story. Meet Richard F. Poncher. In 1954, Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe would be going through a divorce after 9 months of marriage, and in this divorce, DiMaggio would sell 2 crypts that he had had for his burial and sell them to Poncher. Now, Poncher was defined by his wife as a serial entrepreneur who had made a fortune with a variety of electronic firms and once sold U.S. Army surplus airplanes and parts. And with this, the crypt story would slowly change as time would go on. In the beginning, Poncher had originally bought these crypts as a final resting place for him and his wife for when their times inevitably came. But as we learned in 1962, in a weird twist of fate, Marilyn Monroe would overdose on barbiturates and would actually be buried in one of the plots underneath Poncher's. Once Poncher learned about this, he started having a weird fixation with the crypt right above her, the one that he owned. And because of this, he started making sure people knew to bury him in that plot with specific instructions to bury him face down so he's staring at Marilyn Monroe. He knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and even if she was deceased, it was a great honor to be buried next to the late Marilyn Monroe. And as his time grew closer in 1986, where he would die at the age of 81, he did tell his wife that if she was to sell the crypt or not bury him face down, he would haunt her for the rest of eternity. This man's talking very creepy about a woman that ain't his own wife. But in 1986, Poncher would inevitably die at the age of 81 and would stay there for 23 years. Now, during his 23 years in that crypt, he would actually be very controversial once news got out that he was staring face down at Marilyn Monroe, and found it very volatile that someone would do this, that it's completely heinous to disturb someone's resting place even after you're dead. People even petitioned for Poncher to be turned over, but people said that once crypts are sealed, you're not meant to disturb them unless they trade hands, like being sold. Which funnily enough happens in 2009, when Poncher's widow would be racking up a huge mortgage that she couldn't pay off, so she would inevitably sell the crypt that her late husband was resting in. And she would sell it on eBay for a whopping $4.8 million, with bids starting around $50,000. For people playing in the Eurozone, that's close to 2.8 million euros. And so Poncher would inevitably be removed from that crypt and make way for the person who inevitably bought it. I don't know who bought it, but I did try tracking it down. It's kind of sad that Monroe was a troubled woman who lived a very, very anxiety-filled life, and even when it came time for her final resting place, she couldn't rest in peace because she was being violated by someone who learned that they were going to be living above her once they passed on. Marilyn Monroe's story is sad, but I feel like Richard Poncher's story is just downright deplorable. The man may have been a good man while he lived, I don't know, I didn't know him, but doing this kind of act while someone is dead just seems very disrespectful. I would never want to die and have the person above me be obsessed and flip over and want to stare at me for all eternity. It's like an unconsensual cuddle during preschool nap time. But funnily enough, as a little bit of a fun fact, Hugh Hefner actually owns one of the crypts and is buried in one of the crypts that is right next to Marilyn Monroe. And on top of that, in 2021, Marilyn Monroe would actually be in the controversial headlines again because of a statue that they had created in her honor. And it made the infamous vent pose that she has. You know the one where she's standing over an air vent and her dress is blowing up. It was controversial because A, you could see her underwear, and B, the dress showed too much backside. I'm sorry, but isn't that what we want to see? It's Marilyn Monroe, for God's sakes. But thus ends the saga of Marilyn Monroe. I hope she's resting well now, even after her much stressful afterlife dealings with Poncher. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I will see you all next time. Oh boy, this video was a long time in making. About a month of my life editing, researching, recording, and redoing recording. I know there were some things in this video that I said that I didn't have screenshots or quotations of some kind to back up, but that's only because I saw these things and didn't know where to find them again. Even doing specific Google searches, I couldn't seem to find them. But in the end, I hope this was more than enough and that the evidence that I did bring forth was enough for me to back up my point. There are two channels I need to shout out, Norma Jean Baker as well as Helmer Reenberg, two channels that I used for these stock image footage of Marilyn and JFK, and allowing me to use their videos through the idea of Creative Commons. I'll leave both their channel links in the description below, as well as a list of the songs that I used throughout this video, if you want to give them a good listen. They are some goated songs. I say this again, thank you everyone so much for watching. If you made it this far, I greatly appreciate your time. I'm not going to give you the whole spiel of like, comment, and subscribe. Do whatever you want. Share this video, tell a friend, and if they have simping tendencies like John F. Poncher, make sure you tag them in the comments below to truly shame them for their simping behavior. But hey, I hope you're healthy, happy, and I hope you have a great day.